Hey there. Tonight we're talking about how a humble 50-year-old cartographer in 1600 Spain transformed his passion for map-making into a thriving enterprise that brought steady prosperity and respect throughout the Spanish Empire, proving that dedication to craft and service to others naturally attracts abundance in ways beyond imagination. Before you drift off, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if this kind of transformative deep sleep hypnosis speaks to you. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and how many days in a row you've been on this manifestation journey. I love seeing how committed this community is becoming. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let your mind absorb abundance. As the warm summer evening settles over the ancient city of Sevilla in the year 1632, you find yourself drawn into the story of Eduardo Mendoza, a man whose weathered hands hold more than just quills and compass. They hold the keys to prosperity that flows as naturally as the Guadalquivir River through his beloved city. Eduardo sits in his workshop as golden light filters through the latticed windows, casting intricate shadows across the parchments that cover every surface of his workspace, and you can feel the deep satisfaction that radiates from a man who has discovered that true wealth comes not from seeking riches directly, but from serving others with such dedication and skill that abundance becomes as inevitable as the tide. The air is warm and thick with the scent of leather-bound books, fresh ink, and the distant aroma of orange blossoms that drift in from the courtyard below, creating an atmosphere of peaceful productivity that seems to whisper secrets of success to anyone willing to listen. Eduardo's workshop occupies the second floor of a narrow building in the Cartographer's Quarter, where the gentle sounds of the evening, church bells chiming the hour, the soft conversations of neighbors sharing their evening meal on balconies, the rhythmic clip-clop of horses pulling carts over cobblestones, blend together into a symphony of contentment that speaks to the soul about the rewards that come to those who align their talents with service to others. You watch as Eduardo carefully examines a half-finished map spread across his large oak table, his fingers tracing coastlines with the reverence of a man who understands that each line he draws represents not just geography, but opportunity, adventure, and the dreams of countless souls who will use his work to navigate toward their own prosperity. The map before him shows the trade routes to the New World, and as his experienced eye identifies areas where previous cartographers have made errors, coastlines drawn too straight, harbors marked in incorrect positions, dangerous reefs left unmarked, you can sense the quiet confidence that fills him, the deep knowing that his attention to detail and commitment to accuracy has already begun to attract the attention of ship captains, merchants, and even officials from the Casa de Contratación, who are responsible for regulating Spanish trade with the Americas. Eduardo has spent 3 decades perfecting his craft, starting as a young apprentice who swept floors and mixed inks, gradually learning that mastery comes not from rushing toward success, but from falling in love with the process itself, from finding joy in the smallest details, from understanding that when you serve others with excellence, prosperity becomes not a goal to chase, but a natural result of value created. The workshop around him tells the story of this gradual accumulation of abundance. Shelves lined with rare texts on navigation and astronomy, drawers filled with instruments crafted by the finest toolmakers in Europe, walls adorned with his completed works that have already guided Spanish ships safely to ports in Mexico, Peru, and the Philippines. Each map a testament to the wealth that flows to those who combine passion with precision. As the evening light continues to fade, and Eduardo lights the oil lamps that will allow him to work into the night, you begin to understand the deeper principles that have guided his transformation from a struggling apprentice to one of the most sought-after cartographers in the Spanish Empire. There is something in the way he moves, deliberate, unhurried, completely present in each moment, that speaks to a man who has learned that abundance consciousness begins with gratitude for the work itself, with appreciation for the tools in his hands, with recognition that every challenge is simply an opportunity to demonstrate excellence and build reputation. Eduardo remembers the early years when he could barely afford the basic materials for his trade, when he would carefully ration his use of expensive pigments and often worked by candlelight because he couldn't afford enough oil for proper lamps. Yet even in those lean times, he maintained an unwavering belief that dedication to quality would eventually be rewarded, that the universe has a way of recognizing and compensating those who commit themselves fully to serving others through their unique gifts. The maps he created during those challenging years, though made with inferior materials, were already beginning to show the exceptional accuracy and attention to detail that would later make him famous. And you can sense how his commitment to excellence, even when resources were scarce, laid the foundation for all the abundance that would follow. Tonight, as Eduardo works by the gentle light of his lamps, carefully adding the final details to a map commissioned by a wealthy merchant planning a trading expedition to the Caribbean, you can feel the quiet satisfaction that permeates his being, the deep peace that comes from knowing that his work tomorrow will help ships navigate safely through treacherous waters, will enable merchants to find the most profitable ports, will contribute to the prosperity and security of the Spanish Empire, and will ultimately put food on the tables of countless families whose livelihoods depend on successful sea voyages. This sense of purpose beyond personal gain has become the secret to Eduardo's abundance. The understanding that when you focus on how your talents can serve the greater good, financial rewards flow naturally as a byproduct of the value you create, like fruit growing inevitably on a well-tended tree. You watch as he carefully applies gold leaf to highlight major ports on his map, each delicate stroke representing not just artistic skill, but an investment in the quality that has made his work legendary among sea captains and merchants throughout the empire. And you begin to absorb the profound truth that prosperity consciousness is not about constantly thinking about money, but about becoming so focused on excellence and service that abundance appears almost as a surprise, a natural consequence of consistent quality and genuine care for others. As you settle deeper into this story, feeling your own body relax just as Eduardo settles into his evening work routine, you begin to understand how the cartographer's journey toward prosperity began, not with a dramatic moment of inspiration, but with a gradual awakening to the abundance principles that govern all lasting success. Eduardo's path started 30 years earlier, when he was 20 years old, working as an apprentice in the workshop of Master Cristobal Vasquez, one of Sevilla's most respected cartographers. And even in those early days, you can sense how Eduardo's natural curiosity and attention to detail set him apart from other apprentices who viewed their training as simply a means to earn a living, rather than an opportunity to master a craft that could serve the world. The workshop where young Eduardo learned his trade was filled with the same warm, industrious energy that now characterizes his own space. And as you imagine the sound of quills scratching against parchment, the quiet conversations between master and apprentice, the satisfaction of seeing a map take shape line by careful line, you begin to absorb the understanding that all prosperity begins with falling in love with the process of becoming excellent at something that matters to others. Master Vasquez recognized something special in Eduardo from the very beginning, not because the young man showed immediate brilliance, but because he demonstrated what would become the cornerstone of his future abundance: an insatiable desire to understand not just how to do something, but why it should be done that way. A quality that separated him from apprentices who simply followed instructions without grasping the deeper principles behind the craft. Eduardo would spend hours after his official duties were finished, studying the astronomical charts that helped determine longitude, practicing his lettering until each word was perfectly formed, questioning Master Vasquez about the mathematical principles that ensured accuracy in distance calculations, and gradually developing the comprehensive understanding that would later allow him to create maps of unprecedented precision and beauty. You can feel how this dedication to mastery created a positive momentum in Eduardo's life, how each new skill he acquired opened doors to more opportunities, how his reputation for reliability and excellence began to spread through the tight-knit community of cartographers, ship captains, and merchants who depended on accurate maps for their livelihoods and their very survival on the often treacherous seas surrounding Spain and leading to the New World territories. During his apprenticeship, Eduardo learned one of the most important lessons that would shape his approach to abundance for the rest of his life: that true wealth comes not from what you can take from the world, but from what you can give to it, not from how much you can accumulate for yourself, but from how much value you can create for others. This understanding crystallized during a particularly challenging project, when Master Vasquez was commissioned to create a map of the Strait of Gibraltar for the Spanish Navy, a task that required not just technical skill, but absolute accuracy, since navigational errors in those treacherous waters could mean the difference between life and death for countless sailors. Eduardo watched as his master approached this project with a reverence that went far beyond the substantial fee he would receive, checking and double-checking every measurement, consulting multiple sources to verify the position of every reef and shoal, working late into the night to ensure that every detail was perfect. And young Eduardo began to understand that this level of care and dedication was not just professional responsibility, but a form of service to humanity that naturally attracts abundance in return. The breakthrough moment in Eduardo's development came when Master Vasquez allowed him to work independently on a small section of a larger map, specifically the coastline around Cadiz, where Eduardo had grown up and knew intimately from his childhood, spent exploring beaches and rocky outcroppings with his father, a fisherman who had taught him to read the subtle signs of wind and weather that sailors depend on for safe navigation. As Eduardo translated his intimate knowledge of this coastline into precise cartographic representation, he experienced for the first time the deep satisfaction that comes from bridging the gap between personal experience and service to others, from taking knowledge that lives in your heart and mind and transforming it into something that can benefit people you may never meet, but whose safety and success depend on the accuracy of your work. The section of map that Eduardo created was so detailed and accurate that Master Vasquez declared it superior to any previous representation of that coastline, and word of the young apprentice's exceptional work began to spread through Sevilla's maritime community, creating the first ripples of the reputation that would eventually carry Eduardo to prosperity and respect throughout the Spanish Empire. As you continue to relax into this story, feeling your own breathing slow and deepen, just as Eduardo's breathing settles into the rhythm of concentrated work, you begin to absorb the fundamental truth that Eduardo discovered during those formative years: that abundance flows most freely to those who approach their work not as a burden to be endured, but as an opportunity to serve, not as a means to an end, but as an expression of their deepest values and highest capabilities. Eduardo's commitment to excellence was never about showing off or trying to impress others, but about honoring the trust that people placed in his work, understanding that ship captains who used his maps were literally betting their lives and the lives of their crews on his accuracy, that merchants who relied on his route suggestions were risking their entire fortunes on his judgment, that the success or failure of entire expeditions might depend on the care with which he rendered a particular coastline or marked a dangerous reef. This sense of responsibility, rather than feeling like pressure, became a source of energy and motivation that seemed to flow endlessly through Eduardo's work, creating a positive cycle where excellence led to recognition. Recognition led to better opportunities. Better opportunities led to increased skill and confidence, and increased skill and confidence led to even higher levels of excellence. During the final years of his apprenticeship, Eduardo began to develop what would become his signature approach to cartography, a combination of mathematical precision with artistic beauty that made his maps not just functional tools, but works of art that ship captains and merchants treasured and displayed with pride. He learned to blend the practical requirements of navigation with aesthetic elements that transformed his maps into objects of beauty, using color and decorative elements not merely for ornamentation, but to enhance the map's functionality by making important information more memorable and easier to read, even in the challenging conditions aboard a ship at sea. This integration of function and beauty became one of the keys to Eduardo's eventual prosperity, because it meant that his maps commanded premium prices not just for their accuracy, but for their artistry, and clients who might have been satisfied with adequate maps from other cartographers became devoted customers who sought out Eduardo's work specifically because it exceeded their expectations in every dimension. As Master Vasquez aged and began to consider retirement, he recognized that Eduardo had not just learned the technical skills of cartography, but had absorbed the deeper wisdom about how excellence and service naturally create abundance, how reputation is built one project at a time through consistent quality, how the highest prices are paid not by clients who are looking for the cheapest option, but by those who understand the value of superior work and are willing to invest in it. The old master began entrusting Eduardo with increasingly important projects, including direct commissions from the Casa de Contratación and wealthy merchants planning major trading expeditions. And with each successful project, Eduardo's confidence grew. Not the false confidence that comes from arrogance or comparison with others, but the deep, quiet confidence that comes from knowing that you have prepared thoroughly, that you have the skills and knowledge necessary to deliver exceptional value, and that your commitment to excellence will be recognized and rewarded by those who matter most in your field. By the time Eduardo reached his 35th birthday, he had established his own workshop and begun attracting the kind of clients who would form the foundation of his prosperity for decades to come. And as you imagine him in those early days of independence, carefully arranging his new workspace and accepting his first major independent commission, you can feel the mixture of excitement and responsibility that comes when you finally step fully into your own power and begin to see how your unique talents can create abundance, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose lives are touched by your work. Eduardo's transition from apprentice to master craftsman was not marked by any dramatic moment, but by a gradual accumulation of trust and reputation that eventually reached a tipping point where demand for his work exceeded what he could produce, where ship captains began requesting him specifically for their most important expeditions, where merchants competing for the most profitable trade routes sought out his maps as competitive advantages that could mean the difference between modest success and extraordinary prosperity. The workshop that Eduardo established reflected his understanding that environment plays a crucial role in the quality of work you can produce and the abundance you can attract. And as you picture him carefully selecting each piece of equipment, each reference book, each tool that would support his craft, you begin to absorb the wisdom that investing in quality, whether in tools, education, or surroundings, is never an expense, but always an investment that returns itself many times over through the enhanced value you can create for others. Eduardo chose a location in the Cartographer's Quarter, not just because the rent was reasonable, but because being surrounded by others who shared his dedication to excellence created an atmosphere of mutual support and shared standards that elevated everyone's work, where conversations with colleagues often led to insights that improved his maps, where the collective reputation of the quarter attracted the kind of clients who valued quality above all else and were willing to pay appropriately for superior work. One of Eduardo's first major independent commissions came from Captain Rodrigo Fernandez, an experienced navigator who was planning an expedition to establish a new trading post on the coast of Venezuela, and who had heard from multiple sources that Eduardo's maps were so accurate and detailed that they could reduce voyage time by weeks and significantly increase the chances of a successful expedition. As Eduardo worked on this commission, carefully researching every available source of information about the Venezuelan coast, consulting with other captains who had sailed those waters, and applying mathematical calculations to ensure perfect accuracy in his distance and bearing measurements, you can sense how he approached this work, not just as a business transaction, but as a sacred trust, understanding that the success of the entire expedition, the livelihoods of dozens of crew members, and the financial futures of the investors who funded the voyage all depended on the precision and care with which he created this map. The map that Eduardo produced for Captain Fernandez became legendary in Sevilla's maritime community, not just because it enabled the captain to complete his voyage in record time and establish the most profitable trading post on that section of coast, but because the level of detail and accuracy demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything previously available to Spanish explorers and merchants. Eduardo had included information about seasonal weather patterns, the location of fresh water sources, details about local populations and their attitudes toward trade, and precise measurements of harbor depths that allowed ships to approach safely even during low tide. When Captain Fernandez returned to Sevilla with holds full of valuable goods and stories of how Eduardo's map had made the difference between success and failure at several crucial moments during the expedition, word of the cartographer's exceptional abilities spread throughout the Spanish maritime community like ripples spreading across calm water, creating demand for his services that would sustain his prosperity for decades to come. As Eduardo's reputation grew and commissions began arriving faster than he could complete them, he faced a challenge that tests every craftsman who begins to experience success: the temptation to increase output by compromising quality, to meet demand by cutting corners or rushing through projects, to prioritize quantity over the excellence that had created the demand in the first place. Eduardo's response to this challenge reveals one of the deepest secrets of lasting abundance, and as you imagine him carefully considering each commission offer, politely declining projects that would require him to work faster than his standards allowed, and instead raising his prices to match the true value of his time and expertise, you begin to understand that prosperity consciousness often requires saying no to opportunities that might seem attractive in the short term, but would ultimately damage the reputation and standards that create long-term success. Rather than trying to serve every potential client, Eduardo chose to focus on the most important and challenging projects, the expeditions that would have the greatest impact on Spanish trade and exploration, the maps that would be used by the most experienced captains and well-funded merchants, understanding that excellence serves both his clients and his own abundance better than quantity ever could. This decision to prioritize quality over quantity had the seemingly paradoxical effect of increasing both his income and his satisfaction with his work, because clients who needed the highest level of accuracy and detail were willing to pay premium prices for Eduardo's services, and the prestige of working on the most important expeditions in the Spanish Empire enhanced his reputation in ways that routine commissions never could. During this period of growing success, Eduardo also began to develop another characteristic that would contribute significantly to his long-term prosperity: the habit of continuously learning and improving his craft, never allowing himself to become complacent or to rely solely on skills he had already mastered. He invested portions of his increasing income in acquiring new books on astronomy and mathematics, in purchasing more precise instruments as they became available, in traveling to other cities to study with masters who had developed techniques he had not yet learned, understanding that in a rapidly changing world, where Spanish exploration was opening new territories and creating new challenges, only those who continued to grow and adapt would maintain their competitive advantage and continue to attract the best opportunities. Eduardo's commitment to continuous improvement was evident in his response to the challenges posed by mapping the Pacific coast of the Americas, territories so new to Spanish exploration that existing maps were often wildly inaccurate and sometimes dangerously misleading. Rather than simply accepting the limitations of available information, Eduardo began corresponding with captains and explorers who had sailed those waters, developing new techniques for estimating distances and positions when direct measurement was impossible, and creating maps that represented the best possible approximation of reality, given the available information, while clearly indicating areas where uncertainty remained. This innovative approach to dealing with incomplete information not only solved immediate problems for his clients, but established Eduardo as a pioneer in cartographic technique, attracting attention from the highest levels of Spanish colonial administration and leading to commissions that would cement his position as one of the most important cartographers in the empire. As you continue to absorb this story, feeling your body and mind relax more deeply with each passing moment, you begin to internalize the abundance principles that guided Eduardo's rise to prosperity and respect. The understanding that true wealth comes from serving others with excellence, that reputation is built through consistent quality rather than clever marketing, that investing in continuous improvement always pays dividends in increased capabilities and opportunities, and that focusing on creating the highest possible value for others naturally attracts financial abundance as a byproduct rather than as a primary goal. Eduardo's story demonstrates that prosperity consciousness is not about wanting more for yourself, but about becoming someone who can give more to others, not about taking from the world, but about contributing to it in ways that are recognized and valued by those who matter most in your field. As Eduardo entered his 40s, having established himself as one of Sevilla's most respected cartographers, he began to understand and apply principles of strategic thinking that would elevate his work from excellent craftsmanship to genuine artistry. And as you imagine him in his workshop during those peak years, surrounded by commissions from the most important expeditions in the Spanish Empire, you can feel how true mastery involves not just technical skill, but the wisdom to see connections and possibilities that others miss, to anticipate needs before they are expressed, and to create value in dimensions that clients didn't even know they wanted until they experienced the results. Eduardo's approach to cartography had evolved beyond simply responding to requests for maps to actively identifying opportunities where his unique capabilities could solve problems and create advantages for Spanish exploration and trade, understanding that the highest levels of abundance flow to those who become indispensable, not just for what they can do, but for how they think about and approach challenges in their field. One of Eduardo's most significant innovations during this period was his development of what he called living maps, detailed charts that included not just geographical information, but comprehensive intelligence about economic opportunities, political situations, and cultural factors that could affect the success of trading expeditions and colonial enterprises. These maps incorporated information about seasonal variations in weather patterns, the timing of local festivals and markets that could affect trade opportunities, relationships between different indigenous groups that might impact the safety of Spanish settlements, and detailed assessments of natural resources that could make certain locations more valuable than others for long-term colonial development. This holistic approach to cartography reflected Eduardo's understanding that Spanish explorers and merchants needed much more than geographical accuracy to succeed in the complex and rapidly changing world of colonial expansion, and his willingness to expand his expertise beyond traditional cartographic boundaries created a unique value proposition that no other mapmaker in the empire could match. The development of these comprehensive intelligence maps required Eduardo to build a network of correspondence throughout the Spanish territories, ship captains who shared their observations from recent voyages, colonial administrators who provided insights about political and economic conditions in their regions, merchants who contributed information about trade opportunities and market conditions, and even missionaries who offered perspectives on cultural factors that could affect Spanish colonial success. Eduardo's ability to synthesize information from all these sources into coherent, actionable intelligence represented a new form of value creation that went far beyond traditional map-making. And as you imagine him carefully weaving together diverse streams of information into maps that served as strategic guides for some of the most important enterprises in the Spanish Empire, you begin to understand how abundance flows most freely to those who become nodes of connection and synthesis, who create value by bringing together resources and insights that others haven't learned to combine. Eduardo's reputation for strategic thinking and comprehensive intelligence reached its pinnacle when he was commissioned by the Consejo de Indias, the royal council responsible for governing Spanish territories in the Americas, to create a master map of the entire Pacific coast from Mexico to Chile, a project so complex and important that it would occupy him for nearly 2 years and would become one of the foundational documents for Spanish colonial administration in the Pacific region. This commission represented not just recognition of Eduardo's technical abilities, but acknowledgement that his strategic insights and intelligence-gathering capabilities had made him indispensable to the highest levels of Spanish colonial planning. And the fee for this project, more than most craftsmen earned in a decade, reflected the extraordinary value that the Spanish government placed on his unique combination of skills and knowledge. Working on the Master Pacific Map required Eduardo to coordinate with colonial administrators, naval commanders, and merchant organizations throughout the Spanish Empire. And as you imagine him managing this complex web of relationships and information sources, you can sense how true prosperity often involves becoming a catalyst for other people's success, creating value not just through your individual efforts, but by enabling and enhancing the work of others who depend on your expertise and insights. Eduardo's workshop during this period became an informal center of intelligence and planning for Spanish Pacific operations, where captains came to discuss their planned routes, where merchants sought advice about the most promising trade opportunities, where colonial administrators consulted with him about the strategic implications of their policy decisions, and where Eduardo's maps served as the foundation for planning that would shape the development of Spanish territories for generations to come. The completion of the Master Pacific Map established Eduardo's position as the preeminent cartographer in the Spanish Empire, But more importantly, it demonstrated his understanding that lasting abundance comes not from hoarding knowledge and capabilities, but from sharing them in ways that create value for entire communities and institutions. Eduardo's willingness to train apprentices in his advanced techniques, to share his intelligence-gathering methods with other cartographers, and to contribute his insights to royal councils and commercial organizations reflected his understanding that true prosperity is sustainable only when it lifts others as well as yourself, when your success contributes to the success of the larger systems and communities of which you are a part. During this period of peak recognition and financial success, Eduardo also deepened his understanding of another crucial abundance principle: that wealth accumulates most effectively when it is invested wisely rather than simply accumulated, when money is viewed as a tool for creating more value rather than as an end in itself. Eduardo used his substantial earnings from the Master Pacific Map project to purchase property in some of Sevilla's most desirable neighborhoods, to acquire rare books and instruments that would enhance his future work, and to invest in trading expeditions that he had helped plan through his cartographic services, understanding that these investments would continue generating returns long after the initial projects were completed, and would provide security for his later years when he might not be able to maintain the intensive work schedule that had built his prosperity. Eduardo's investment strategy reflected the same principles of careful research and strategic thinking that guided his cartographic work, and as you imagine him studying potential investments with the same attention to detail that he applied to mapping coastlines and trade routes, you begin to absorb the understanding that abundance consciousness extends beyond your primary work to encompass all aspects of how you manage and multiply the resources that your skills and service have created. Eduardo's investments were not speculative gambles, but carefully researched commitments based on his deep understanding of Spanish colonial trade, his knowledge of which routes and territories offered the best opportunities for long-term growth, and his recognition that his unique position at the center of Spanish maritime intelligence gave him insights that could guide investment decisions as effectively as they guided his cartographic work. The success of Eduardo's investment strategy created a positive feedback loop that further enhanced his prosperity and reputation, because his financial independence allowed him to be even more selective about the projects he accepted, to spend more time on research and innovation, and to take on long-term projects that other cartographers couldn't afford to undertake, while his success as an investor enhanced his credibility with merchants and colonial administrators who saw his business acumen as confirmation of the strategic insights that made his maps so valuable. This integration of professional excellence with financial wisdom demonstrates another key aspect of prosperity consciousness: that true abundance involves developing competence and confidence in all areas that affect your financial well-being, not just your primary area of expertise. As Eduardo approaches his 50th year, the age at which we encounter him in his workshop on this warm summer evening, his understanding of abundance has evolved far beyond the accumulation of wealth or the achievement of professional recognition to encompass a deeper wisdom about the interconnectedness of service, excellence, and prosperity that guides every aspect of his life and work. And as you settle even more deeply into this story, feeling your breathing slow and your mind become receptive to the profound truths that Eduardo has discovered through 3 decades of dedicated service, you begin to absorb the understanding that the highest levels of abundance come not from pursuing success for its own sake, but from aligning your unique talents with purposes that serve something greater than yourself, while trusting that the universe will provide abundantly for those who give their gifts freely and completely to to the world. Eduardo's workshop has become more than just a place where maps are created. It has evolved into a center of learning and mentorship where young cartographers come to study advanced techniques, where experienced navigators share their knowledge of newly discovered territories, where merchants and colonial administrators seek counsel on strategic questions that extend far beyond geography into the realms of economics, politics, and cultural understanding. The transformation of Eduardo's workspace into this hub of collaborative intelligence reflects his recognition that the greatest abundance comes not from working in isolation, but from creating environments where knowledge can be shared, where insights can be synthesized, and where the collective wisdom of a community can be brought to bear on the challenges and opportunities that shape their shared future. The maps that Eduardo creates now represent the culmination of not just his individual expertise, but the collaborative intelligence of an entire network of explorers, traders, administrators, and scholars who have come to trust him as both a keeper of their secrets and a synthesizer of their collective knowledge. When a ship captain shares information about a previously unknown harbor, when a merchant reports on changing political conditions in a distant territory, when a colonial administrator seeks advice about the strategic implications of establishing a new settlement, they do so knowing that Eduardo will integrate their insights into maps and intelligence reports that will benefit the entire Spanish colonial enterprise while maintaining the confidentiality and trust that makes such sharing possible. This role as a trusted keeper and synthesizer of collective wisdom has brought Eduardo a form of abundance that extends far beyond financial compensation to include the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing that his work contributes to the safety, success, and prosperity of countless individuals whose lives are touched by Spanish exploration and trade. Eduardo understands that every ship that reaches its destination safely using one of his maps represents families who will be reunited, merchants whose investments will bear fruit, crew members who will return home with stories and earnings from successful voyages, and colonial settlements that will receive the supplies and reinforcements they need to thrive in challenging new environments. The financial abundance that flows from this elevated level of service and responsibility far exceeds what Eduardo earned in his earlier years, not because he charges more for his individual maps, but because the comprehensive nature of his services and the strategic value of his insights command premium compensation from clients who understand that his work can make the difference between success and failure for entire enterprises. Colonial administrators are willing to pay substantial fees for strategic assessments that help them allocate resources effectively. Merchants invest significant sums in comprehensive intelligence reports that give them competitive advantages in rapidly changing markets. And naval commanders value Eduardo's tactical insights so highly that they often consult with him before finalizing plans for major expeditions. Yet the most profound aspect of Eduardo's abundance consciousness at this stage of his life is his understanding that true prosperity is measured not just by what you can accumulate for yourself, but by what you can give back to the communities and institutions that have supported your success. Eduardo has begun using his substantial wealth to fund scholarships for promising young cartographers who lack the financial resources to complete their training, to support the library at the University of Sevilla's Department of Geography and Astronomy, and to commission voyages of pure exploration that will expand the frontiers of geographical knowledge without immediate commercial objectives, understanding that these investments in future knowledge and capability will benefit not just Spain, but all of humanity's understanding of the world. Eduardo's philanthropic activities reflect the same strategic thinking and attention to detail that characterize his professional work, and as you imagine him carefully selecting recipients for his scholarships, designing funding structures that will maximize the impact of his contributions, and collaborating with university scholars to identify the research projects that offer the greatest potential for advancing cartographic science, you begin to understand that abundance consciousness at its highest level involves becoming a conscious partner with the forces of evolution and progress, using your accumulated resources and influence to accelerate positive change in ways that will benefit generations yet to come. The evening routine that Eduardo follows as he works on the Caribbean trading route map represents a meditation on excellence and service that has become second nature to him over the decades. Each precise line and carefully chosen color reflecting not just technical skill, but a deep appreciation for the trust that others place in his work and the responsibility that comes with being entrusted with the safety and success of those who depend on his maps. As you watch Eduardo work by lamplight, you can sense the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that every aspect of his craft has been mastered, that every detail has been considered, that the map he creates tonight will exceed the expectations of even the most demanding clients, while serving as a reliable guide for navigators who stake their lives and fortunes on the accuracy of his work. Eduardo's approach to this evening's work demonstrates another key aspect of mature abundance consciousness: the understanding that excellence is not something you achieve once and then maintain through repetition, but something that must be renewed and deepened with each new project, each new challenge, each new opportunity to serve others through the application of your highest capabilities. Even though Eduardo has created hundreds of maps over the course of his career, he approaches tonight's work with the same attention to detail, the same commitment to accuracy, and the same reverence for the trust placed in him that he brought to his very first independent commission 15 years ago, understanding that reputation and abundance are preserved not through past achievements, but through the quality of present performance. As Eduardo adds the final touches to tonight's map, carefully checking each measurement against his calculations, verifying each landmark against multiple sources, and ensuring that even the decorative elements contribute to the map's functionality and beauty, you can feel the deep satisfaction that radiates from a life lived in alignment with principles of service, excellence, and contribution to the greater good. This satisfaction represents the ultimate form of abundance, the knowledge that your life's work has made a positive difference in the world, that your talents have been fully expressed in service to others, and that the prosperity you have achieved is both a result of and a foundation for continuing to create value for the communities and institutions that depend on your unique capabilities and insights. As the warm summer evening deepens around Eduardo's workshop and the sounds of Sevilla settle into the peaceful rhythm of night, distant conversations giving way to the gentle splash of fountains in courtyards, the clip-clop of horses replaced by the soft footsteps of late evening strollers, the business of day transformed into the contemplative quiet of evening, you find yourself absorbing the deepest lessons of Eduardo's remarkable journey from struggling apprentice to master cartographer, understanding that true abundance is not a destination to be reached, but a way of being that emerges naturally when you align your unique talents with service to others while maintaining unwavering commitment to excellence in every aspect of your work and life. Eduardo's story demonstrates that prosperity consciousness is not about developing techniques for attracting wealth, but about becoming the kind of person who naturally creates value for others, who serves as a catalyst for positive change, and who understands that the greatest abundance flows to those who give their gifts freely and completely, while trusting that the universe will provide generously for those who contribute generously to the well-being of their communities and the advancement of human knowledge and capability. The map that Eduardo completes tonight will join the hundreds of other charts, intelligence reports, and strategic assessments that represent his life's work and contribution to the Spanish Empire's exploration and colonization of the New World. But more than that, it represents a meditation on the principles of service and excellence that have guided his transformation from a young man who could barely afford basic materials to a master craftsman whose work is treasured by the most important figures in Spanish colonial administration, whose strategic insights influence decisions that affect the lives of thousands of people throughout the empire, and whose accumulated wealth provides not just security for his own future, but resources for supporting the next generation of cartographers and explorers who will carry forward the tradition of excellence and service that he has helped establish. As Eduardo carefully rolls the completed map and places it in a protective case, preparing it for delivery tomorrow morning to the merchant who commissioned it, you can sense the quiet pride that comes not from ego or self-congratulation, but from the deep satisfaction of knowing that another piece of work has been completed to the highest possible standard, that another client will receive value that exceeds their expectations, and that another small contribution has been made to the great enterprise of human exploration and understanding that connects Spain to the wider world and opens new possibilities for trade, settlement, and cultural exchange that will benefit generations to come. The prosperity that Eduardo has achieved through 3 decades of dedicated service represents much more than financial success or professional recognition. It embodies a complete integration of personal fulfillment, material abundance, and meaningful contribution to the larger purposes that give life direction and significance, demonstrating that true wealth encompasses not just what you can accumulate for yourself, but what you can create for others, not just what you can take from the world, but what you can give back to it, not just the comfort and security that money can provide, but the satisfaction and sense of purpose that come from knowing that your life's work has made a positive difference in the lives of others and in the advancement of human knowledge and capability. Eduardo's understanding of abundance has evolved to encompass the recognition that prosperity is not something you achieve in isolation, but something that emerges from your participation in the larger networks of relationship, trust, and mutual support that constitute healthy communities and institutions. And as you imagine him reflecting on the countless collaborations that have shaped his career, the master who trained him with patience and wisdom, the clients who trusted him with their most important enterprises, the apprentices he has mentored and guided toward their own mastery, the colleagues with whom he has shared knowledge and insights, you begin to absorb the understanding that abundance consciousness necessarily includes gratitude for all the ways that others have contributed to your success and recognition of your responsibility to pass forward the gifts and opportunities that you have received. The evening routine that Eduardo follows as he prepares to close his workshop for the night reflects the same attention to detail and appreciation for quality that characterizes his professional work, carefully cleaning and storing his instruments, organizing his materials for tomorrow's projects, reviewing his correspondence to identify priorities for the coming days, and taking time to acknowledge the day's accomplishments while setting intentions for continued excellence and service in the work ahead. This integration of mindfulness and appreciation into the mundane aspects of his daily routine demonstrates another key aspect of abundance consciousness: the understanding that prosperity is sustained not just through major achievements, but through consistent attention to the small details that maintain quality, efficiency, and preparedness for new opportunities as they arise. As Eduardo extinguishes the lamps in his workshop and prepares for sleep, his mind naturally turns to the projects and possibilities that await him in the coming months. a commission to create detailed maps of the Philippine Islands for the Spanish Pacific Fleet, an invitation to contribute to a comprehensive atlas of Spanish colonial territories that will be presented to the king, an opportunity to collaborate with astronomers at the University of Salamanca on improving methods for determining longitude at sea. And you can feel how abundance consciousness includes the ability to look forward with confidence and excitement, knowing that your reputation for excellence ensures a steady stream of meaningful opportunities, while your accumulated resources provide the freedom to choose projects based on their potential for contribution and growth, rather than immediate financial necessity. Eduardo's preparation for sleep includes a practice of gratitude that has become second nature to him over the years, taking time to acknowledge the clients whose trust has enabled his success, the apprentices whose enthusiasm reminds him why excellence matters, the colleagues whose knowledge and friendship enrich his understanding of his craft, and the larger purposes that his work serves in advancing Spanish exploration and contributing to humanity's understanding of the world. This practice of gratitude is not a technique for attracting more abundance, but a natural expression of the appreciation that comes from recognizing how interconnected your success is with the support, opportunities, and wisdom that others have provided, and how your own prosperity creates opportunities for you to contribute to the success and well-being of others in return. As Eduardo settles into sleep in his comfortable bedroom above the workshop, surrounded by the books, instruments, and maps that represent his life's work and passion, you can feel the deep peace that comes from living in complete alignment with your values and purposes, from knowing that your talents have been fully expressed in service to others, from understanding that your prosperity has been earned through excellence and contribution rather than manipulation or exploitation, and from trusting that tomorrow will bring new opportunities to continue growing, serving, and creating value in ways that benefit both yourself and the larger communities of which you are a part. The abundance that Eduardo has achieved represents the natural result of consistently applying principles that are available to anyone willing to commit themselves to excellence, service, and continuous growth. The understanding that prosperity flows to those who focus on creating value for others rather than simply accumulating wealth for themselves. That reputation is built through consistent quality rather than clever marketing or self-promotion. That the highest levels of success come to those who develop comprehensive competence rather than just narrow technical skills. That lasting abundance requires investing in relationships and communities rather than pursuing individual advantage, and that true wealth encompasses not just financial resources, but the satisfaction, purpose, and positive impact that come from using your unique talents in service to something greater than yourself. As you absorb these final lessons from Eduardo's remarkable journey and feel your own body and mind settling into the deep relaxation that prepares you for restorative sleep, you begin to understand that abundance consciousness is not something you develop through special techniques or secret knowledge, but something that emerges naturally when you commit yourself to becoming the kind of person who creates value for others, who serves as catalyst for positive change, and who trusts that the universe provides generously for those who give their gifts freely and completely, while maintaining unwavering commitment to excellence in every aspect of their work and life, knowing that prosperity is not a destination to be reached, but a way of being that becomes increasingly natural as you align your unique talents with purposes that serve the greater good and contribute to the advancement of human knowledge, capability, and well-being.